What do you picture when you think of the Middle Ages? Castles? Knights in shining armor? Maybe even courtly love? Well, forget all that. Because while medieval society had its legends, it also had something much darker, especially for women. In a world ruled by religion, patriarchy, and fear, justice could be cruel, and punishment often twisted into something closer to torture. In this video, we're diving deep into 10 real punishments that women could face in the Middle Ages. Some were designed to humiliate, others were meant to break the body and spirit. Either way, they tell us a lot about what life was really like, especially if you were born on the wrong side of power. Let's begin. 1. The scold's bridle. The first punishment is as bizarre as it is horrifying. The scold's bridle, also known as the brank. It was a metal cage placed over a woman's head, with a flat piece of metal, sometimes spiked, inserted into her mouth to press down the tongue. The goal? Silence. This punishment was reserved for women accused of gossiping, arguing, or talking back, what they called a scold. But this wasn't just about silencing speech. It was public humiliation. Women were paraded through town in this device, as people laughed, mocked, and even spit. Sometimes the bridle was chained to a wall or post, and the woman was left there for hours or days. Freedom of speech? Not in medieval Europe. 2. Ducking. This punishment was often used for women accused of witchcraft or being quarrelsome. Again, the infamous scold. The woman would be tied to a chair or a wooden stool attached to a long beam. She was then lowered repeatedly into a river or pond, not to kill, but to terrify, humiliate, and sometimes drown. People gathered to watch. It was public entertainment. If she drowned, well, too bad. At least she was punished. If she survived, they might call it proof of her guilt. There was no winning. 3. Witch trials and burning. Let's talk about one of the most infamous punishments in history, the witch trials. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, thousands of women were accused of witchcraft. The trials were often a sham, based on superstition, hearsay, or personal grudges. Once accused, torture was used to extract confessions, thumbscrews, iron boots, even the rack. And then, death. Many were burned alive at the stake. Others were hanged. Witchcraft became a catch-all charge for women who stepped outside their role. Healers, widows, midwives, or just women who lived alone. It was a war on independence, masked as religion. 4. The pillory and stocks. Public humiliation was one of the most common forms of punishment, and the pillory was a favorite tool. Imagine standing in a wooden frame in the town square, your head and hands locked in place, for hours or even days. You couldn't scratch your nose or protect yourself from rotten food being thrown by the crowd. In winter, you could freeze. For women, it was even worse, because crowds often jeered with sexual insults, or worse. Sometimes women were punished this way simply for bearing a child out of wedlock or disobeying their husband. 5. Branding. Branding wasn't just for criminals. It was used to mark women permanently. Prostitutes, adulteresses, or even immoral women could be burned with hot irons, sometimes on the face, hand, or shoulder. One common mark was the letter F for female felon or fornicator. These brands marked a woman for life. Even if she was freed, the scar became her identity. Imagine walking into a market with a branded cheek, and everyone knowing your sin. 6. Forced shaving hair has always been a symbol of beauty, of dignity, of identity. So in the Middle Ages, one way to shame a woman was simple: shave her head. This punishment was often used on women accused of adultery or sexual misconduct. Some towns shaved women's hair as part of public penance, forcing them to parade through the streets. Others combined it with whipping or exile. The message was clear: your body isn't yours. we control how you look and how others see you. 7. Flaying and whipping. Corporal punishment was common, and women weren't exempt. Whipping could be done in private or in public squares. Sometimes it was a few lashes. Other times, the flesh was torn to the bone. And yes, there are records of partial flaying, the skin being stripped for repeat offenses or serious accusations. Women might be whipped for theft, adultery, blasphemy, or simply stepping out of their place. Sometimes it was part of a religious correction. Other times, pure cruelty. 8. Enforced chastity devices. You've probably heard of chastity belts. But were they real? Historians debated. But yes, there's some evidence that some form of chastity restraints existed in the late Middle Ages. Whether used for actual control, punishment, or fear of infidelity, the idea was clear. Control female sexuality by force. Some belts had locking mechanisms, others may have been symbolic. But even the concept reveals the mindset. A woman's body wasn't her own. It was property. 9. Marital punishments. One of the darkest truths about medieval justice is this: husbands were legally allowed to beat their wives. Domestic violence was rarely punished. In fact, it was considered the man's right and duty to discipline his wife. As long as the beating didn't kill her, it was often ignored by the law. And if a woman fought back, she could be punished for rebellion, disobedience, or even sorcery. It wasn't justice. It was ownership, enforced through fear. 10. Death by drowning. Finally, the ultimate punishment: death. Drowning was often used for women convicted of infanticide, adultery, or witchcraft. They were tied into sacks with animals, like snakes or dogs, and thrown into rivers. In other cases, women were simply thrown in, weighted, and drowned publicly. It was seen as cleaner than burning, but the message was the same. You broke the law. You broke the system. Now the system will break you. The punishments we've talked about weren't just brutal. They were strategic. They were designed to silence women, to shame them, to control their bodies and their minds. And while we like to think we've come a long way, echoes of this mindset still linger in some corners of the world today. But the more we study the past, the more we recognize these patterns and resist them. History isn't just about kings and battles. It's about people, about power, about pain. And sometimes telling the truth is the first step toward justice, even centuries later. If you found this video powerful or eye-opening, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.